Welcome back to the basement. I'm Steve Lewis. Having wound up our deep dive into the year 1975 last week, I thought it was a good time to catch up on some viewer comments. We'll do that this week and next week before moving on to some new topics, which I'll talk a little bit more about next time. Talking about the 1975 Spirit of America collection in episode 288, I noted that Capitol had promised a saturation marketing campaign complete with television commercials. I distinctly remember the TV commercials for Endless Summer a year earlier, but I don't recall ever seeing any for Spirit of America. Both Mike Oliva and Go With The Flow recalled seeing animated commercials for the album. Go With The Flow, in particular, remembered the commercial animated the cartoon of Paul Revere from the back cover to have him singing Ba 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 Bran. He added that Mrs. Go With The Flow also remembers the commercial. Maybe I'm just highly suggestible, but that cartoon singing Barbara Ann does sound kind of familiar. Maybe I did see it. Anyway, thanks to Mike and to Mr. and Mrs. Go With The Flow for confirming that Spirit of America, like Endless Summer, was advertised on TV. I agreed with Joel Jr.'s observation that it seemed odd in their Billboard press announcement that Capitol specified that commercials for Spirit of America would run on shows like The Midnight Special, Dinah Shore, and late movies. Dinah Shore was a popular afternoon talk show host at the time. She had come to her greatest prominence as a vocalist in the post-big band, pre-rock late 40s and early 50s, and certainly didn't represent the youth demographic that Capitol was aiming at by advertising on shows like The Midnight Special. As Joel put it, were they trying to get my mom to buy it? It is mystifying. On a hunch, I checked and saw that Dinah Shore's next album, released in 1976, was a double set advertised on television and released by Capitol Records. I'm not sure of the exact sequence of events, but I wonder if maybe the mention of the Dinah Shore show was either meant as a little plug for a new Capitol signing or to please an artist that they were trying to sign. It's just a thought. A couple of our excellent UK correspondents, John Hammond and Raymond Gill, let me know that Spirit of America was released in the UK in 1975 as well. Like Endless Summer, the UK release fit both US albums onto a single disc. Side 1 of the UK album consists of the 12 tracks that make up sides 1 and 2 of the US release. Oddly, side 2 of the UK album starts with the tracks on side 4 of the US album, followed by the tracks from side 3, so the UK album ends with Custom Machine instead of Graduation Day. I suppose that was an error, but it's possible that somebody thought that was a better closer for the UK audience. Raymond Gill says the UK version came several months after the US release, and until the UK version, the US album was widely available there as an import. He added that it was a mid-priced release. It appears to have been part of a set of budget-priced albums called the Capitol Vine series, which, around the same time, released other albums by current and former Capitol artists. Based on a 1975 label sampler, the complete roster seems to have been the Beach Boys, the Steve Miller Band, Bing Crosby, Dick Haymes, Jesse Colin Young, Glenn Campbell, Benny Goodman, Nat King Cole, Linda Ronstadt, and Frank Sinatra. John Hammond says the release was not widely promoted. The Beach Boys collection that hit it big in the UK won't come until a year later, and of course we'll discuss that when we get to 1976. When talking about Spirit of America, I agreed with Go With The Flow's suggestion that Breakaway would have been an excellent choice for a single from the album. George Hean let me know that Breakaway was re-released as a single in the UK in June 1975, apparently some time before Spirit of America was released there. Breakaway had already been a sizable hit in the UK, having gone to number 6 on its 1969 release, compared to the US, where it topped out at number 63. From what I can find, the 1975 UK re-release didn't chart, but it had the original B-side, Celebrate the News, and as George Hean pointed out, the 1969 single had become pretty scarce, so it allowed fans to get a copy, or in George's case, replace an original copy worn out by repeated listenings. I didn't notice it at the time, but I wouldn't be surprised if a fair number of those UK singles were imported into the US as well. While we're on the subject of UK singles, I wonder if any viewers in the UK can tell me why their singles so often come with this perforation around the center. It's obviously meant to be removable so that it can be played on a turntable with a wider spindle. In the US, turntables routinely come with this little adapter that drops over the spindle for playing 45s. If you had a standard turntable, why would you ever need to remove this? You would just play it without the adapter, right? Did some UK turntables used to come with a wider spindle built in or something? I've been seeing this for decades and I've never understood it. If anybody can pass along an explanation, I would really appreciate it. Finally, on different editions of Spirit of America, Aero Module mentioned that he's looking for a copy of the collection with the classic capital rainbow label as opposed to the standard mid-70s reddish-orange label. He says he understands it's not particularly well regarded, but would like to find a copy for collecting purposes. I never knew it existed, and it does look pretty cool. Based on what I saw on Discogs, I believe the Rainbow Label edition was issued in 1983. Thanks for letting me know about it, Aero Module, and happy hunting. Also in the Spirit of America episode, we talked about the legendary Wembley Stadium concert on June 21, 1975, headlined by Elton John and featuring the Beach Boys, the Eagles, Joe Walsh, Rufus, and Stackridge. Famously, pretty much everyone, including Elton John, agrees that the stars of the show that day were the Beach Boys, who put on a high-energy and enthusiastically received set. Raymond Gill was lucky enough to have actually been at the show and relayed that the gig was particularly awesome because the crowd had to be won over. When the DJ was listing the acts, hardly anyone cheered at the mention of the Beach Boys. During California Girls, Raymond says that he felt as if a spell was being cast as the crowd began standing up and singing along. He says it was sheer bliss, all the way through Dennis closing the set with "You Are So Beautiful." Thanks for passing along the memories, Ray. I wish I could have been there. Ken Alvis had been there at Anaheim Stadium a few weeks earlier on May 23, 1975, when the Beach Boys appeared with Chicago. He says, the Beach Boys had the crowd rocking so much that the entire upper deck was noticeably moving up and down. They stopped the concert until the swaying ended and then scolded the crowd. Talking about the Beach Boys tour with Chicago, I listed some of the interesting reported crossovers of the Beach Boys and Chicago performing on each other's material during the tour. I knew it wasn't a definitive list. On episode 288, Jake from the Good Timin' podcast added links to a couple of other interesting recordings from the tour that can be found on YouTube, including Carl singing lead on Saturday in the Park, which is great and it's so clearly Carl, and while it's not Chicago related, Dennis singing In the Back of My Mind on that tour. All the feedback I got about that tour only makes me more strongly aware of what a shame it is that the tapes of that tour are sitting somewhere collecting dust. Fingers crossed we'll finally get a nice live set someday. As you may be aware, we did get some archival music released recently. Something There, Remembering Jeffrey Foskett, came out on July 11th, 2025. It looks like a tribute album, but it's really more of a Jeffrey Foskett highlights and rarities collection. Jeffrey participated in all the recordings, and 15 of the album's 25 tracks are previously unissued. It's an attractive package that comes with an 8-page full-color booklet. The booklet contains a brief bio, lots of testimonials from those on the album, and some liner notes about the release. The inner sleeve has some basic information about the individual tracks, but lacks any detail on players or contextual information for the unreleased recordings. I'm sure that most everybody watching this channel is aware of Jeffrey Foskett, who began working with the Beach Boys in the early 80s and stayed involved with them for around 40 years. His guitar work, and especially his high falsetto, made him an integral part of the band to the point where I always felt they should have gone ahead and made him a Beach Boy somewhere along the line. Of course, we sadly lost Jeff on December 11th, 2023. The album is varied with some tracks from Jeff's albums and many collaborations over the years. Surprisingly, with tracks from so many projects over so many years, it can still be enjoyed as an album. Among the highlights are the opening track, Tell Me, which is a nice slice of surprisingly complex Kinks and Beatles-influenced power pop recorded in 1980 by Jeff and his early band, The Pranks. Based on the recording, it sounds like the pranks should have been contenders for early 80s power pop cult stardom. That's followed by a Mike Love-produced version of Barbara Ann by Mike Love's Endless Summer Beach Band featuring Jeffrey on lead vocals, recorded in the mid-80s. After that, we get a short a cappella Beach Boys pastiche, Splash City, written by Jeffrey and John Stamos. I mention it because it came up in episode 264, Cool Stuff I Found Out Part 30, as having been performed in a brief appearance by Jeff Foskett and Beach Boys associates John Cowsill, Bobby Figueroa, and Gary Griffin on the October 28, 1988 episode of Full House, It's Not My Job. The major draw of the collection for Beach Boys fans is the previously unreleased Mary Honey, written by Brian Wilson and featuring Brian, Jeffrey, and Gary Griffin. Reportedly, Brian wrote it as Mary Honey in the late 70s. It was rewritten and recorded as Turning Point, also known as So Long, with Gary Usher in 1986, which went unreleased, but you can find it here on YouTube. It was rewritten once again with new lyrics by Stephen Kalinich as You've Touched Me, which appeared on Getting In Over My Head in 2004. I found mentions online that Mary Honey was recorded in 2008 around the time of the Lucky Old Sun sessions. It appears that a version was recorded then, but according to the album liner notes, this version was recorded in 1994. The 1994 date isn't hard to believe. The production doesn't drip with 80s sound the way the Turning Point version does, but there's enough synth to make it sound, to me at least, more like 1994 than 2008. Stylistically, it sounds like it could almost be an outtake from Brian's 1988 solo album, where it would have fit in comfortably with tracks like There's So Many. That said, it also strongly brings to mind 1977's Love You album with the synth and piano. It's a nice find, and happily, you will definitely hear Brian on the track. It really comes across a bit more as a Brian Wilson track with Jeffrey Foskett and Gary Griffin than it does as a Jeffrey Foskett track with Brian Wilson. Brian is also featured on Everything I Need, which originally came out on Jeffrey's 12 and 12 album in 2000. In a couple of weeks, I plan to kick off a new series on recordings featuring Brian Wilson. 12 and 12 will be part of that discussion, but there's so much to get to before that it might not come up for another year or two. Everything I Need is a track written in the late 90s by Brian and his old Pet Sounds collaborator, Tony Asher. It's performed by Jeffrey Foskett and Darian Sahanaja with an additional backing vocal by Ivy Borg. The song first appeared on The Wilsons by Carney and Wendy Wilson in 1997. Jeffrey Foskett's version starts with a count-in by Brian. The recording features some Pet Sounds style strings and a very Pet Sounds influenced instrumental break, but apart from that, it sounds surprisingly more like late 60s Baroque pop, like the Cowsills or maybe the Left Bank. Brian takes the lead vocal on the last line of the choruses and on the middle 8. Brian also sang the middle 8 on the Wilsons version. Something There is a nice package and gives an idea of the range of projects and collaborations Jeffrey undertook over his career. Hardcore Beach Boys fans will want it mainly for the inclusion of Mary Honey, but I'm sure you'll find much more to enjoy besides. In comments on episode 286, U.S. Pop Culture 1975 Part 3, Barbara Kirk mentioned that some British journalist asked if the chorus to the groundbreaking Kraftwerk single Autobahn was meant as a tribute to the Beach Boys' Fun, Fun, Fun. The German lyrics, Wir fahren, fahren, fahren auf der Autobahn, translate simply to We're driving, driving, driving on the highway. When I heard it back in 1975, it certainly sounded to my ears like fun, fun, fun on the Autobahn. And I'm sure I wasn't the only English speaker who heard it that way. For some reason, I never considered that it might have been a deliberate Beach Boys tribute. It certainly seems like a possibility. It's very interesting, and thanks, Barbara, for passing that along. And one more thing on the subject of misheard foreign lyrics. In episode 282, Cool Stuff Part 33, we discussed the sometimes goofy interpretation of the Amusement Parks USA lyrics on the Japanese single. I loved Beanie's observation. The unique Japanese translation of Amusement Parks USA explains why the Ventures remain popular in Japan to this day. And that'll do it for this week. Thanks everybody for all the great info, insights, and perspective. I hope you join me next week for more of the same. Thanks for watching. Have a great week. Bye.